The sunset cast a warm glow over the hidden rooftop garden, where petals whispered secrets in the breeze. In the midst of this sanctuary, voices clashed like swords. "Do you think I can't see through your lies, Emma?" David's voice was sharp, jealousy dripping from every word. Emma's heart ached with every syllable, her defenses crumbling as she whispered, "It's not about what's hidden, David, but about what I've yet to reveal." Tension crackled between them, heavy with the weight of truths unspoken, until David's eyes burned with a mix of anger and desperation, delivering his final blow. "Then tell me why you can't look me in the eye anymore." Chapter 1. Tasting Notes. The room was brimming with laughter, and a gentle clinking of glasses, each sound resonating like delicate chimes in the softly lit winery. Emma cradled her glass, swirling the deep crimson liquid, watching it catch the light and transform into a glimmering kaleidoscope. The act was part ritual, part distraction, a moment of stillness in the midst of her swirling thoughts. Beside her, David chatted animatedly with a fellow enthusiast, his voice a comforting hum in the background. Emma's eyes wandered, tracing the elegant arches of the room, the warm glow of the chandeliers casting playful shadows. It was then her gaze found him a stranger standing at the far end, framed by the amber glow of the setting sun, filtering through the large windows. There was something in the way he stood, a confident ease that drew her in, like a painting with colors that whispered secrets only she could understand. His laughter rang out, rich and inviting, and Emma felt a tug, an inexplicable pull that made her pulse quicken. "Emma?" David's voice broke through her reverie, bringing her back to the present. His smile was warm, yet she noticed the subtle flicker of his eyes, a shadow of something darker lurking beneath his usual jovial demeanor. "What do you think of this one?" He gestured towards the bottle, oblivious to the undercurrents swirling around them. "It's complex," Emma replied, her voice steady despite the flutter in her chest. The wine was indeed complex, its taste layered with notes of cherry and spice, but she was no longer sure if she was describing the wine or the emotions coursing through her. As the evening unfolded, she found her attention drawn again and again to the stranger. Each accidental brush of their gazes was like a spark, igniting something dormant within her. And each time, David's arm would tighten around her waist, a reminder of his presence, his claim. The room, once a sanctuary of flavors and scents, now felt charged with a tension that was both exhilarating and terrifying. Emma wondered if anyone else could sense it, the invisible thread pulling her towards something unknown. "You seem distracted tonight," David observed, his tone light yet probing. "Is everything all right?" Emma met his gaze, her smile a practiced facade. "Just taking it all in," she replied, her voice a careful blend of sincerity and evasion. David nodded, but she caught the slight furrow in his brow, the way his eyes lingered on her a moment too long, as if trying to unravel a mystery he wasn't sure he wanted to solve. As they moved to the next tasting station, Emma couldn't shake the feeling that she was on the brink of something profound, something that could change everything. The air was thick with the scent of aged oak and ripe fruit, but it was the unspoken words, the glances that lingered a heartbeat too long, that truly intoxicated her. By the end of the night, as they stepped out into the cool embrace of the evening, Emma felt a strange sense of relief mingled with anticipation. The stranger was gone, yet his presence lingered, like an unfinished melody echoing in her mind. "Let's come back soon," David suggested, his hand warm in hers, grounding her to the familiar. Emma nodded, her thoughts a swirl of possibilities. "Yes," she replied, her voice barely more than a whisper. "I'd like that." But even as she spoke, she knew that this was only the beginning, the first note in a symphony of desires yet to be composed. Chapter 2. Beneath the Surface. The whisper of the city below was a gentle hum, a distant echo that barely reached the hidden oasis where Emma and David now stood. The rooftop garden, tucked away above the bustling streets, was a tapestry of lush greens and vibrant blossoms, each petal and leaf whispering secrets of growth and renewal. It was a place that promised escape, a sanctuary high above the mundane, where the air was rich with the scent of earth and possibility. Emma walked slowly, her fingers trailing along the edge of a weathered wooden bench, feeling the rough texture under her touch. a stark contrast to the smoother, more predictable paths she'd been treading in her life. As she paused to admire a cluster of lavender, she couldn't help but draw parallels between the garden's untamed beauty and the tangled emotions that had taken root within her. "It's beautiful up here," David remarked, his voice breaking the tranquility. He stood a few paces away, his hands tucked into his pockets, surveying the scene as if trying to absorb its magic. "I thought you'd like it." Emma nodded, her gaze drifting over the myriad shades of green, the way sunlight danced through the foliage, casting dappled patterns on the ground. "I do," she replied softly, though her mind wandered elsewhere, to the complexity of her feelings and the unsettling awareness that something was shifting within her. They walked side by side, but Emma felt the distance between them, an invisible chasm that had widened over time. She glanced at David, his profile familiar yet suddenly foreign, as if she were seeing him through new eyes. His presence was steady, comforting in its consistency, yet she couldn't ignore the undercurrent of dissatisfaction that tugged at her heart. "You've been quiet since the winery," David observed, his tone light yet probing, mirroring the same question he had asked before. "Is there something on your mind?" Emma hesitated, searching for the right words. I guess I've been thinking about us," she admitted, her voice barely more than a whisper. "About what we want, where we're headed." David turned to face her, his expression a mix of concern and confusion. "I thought we were happy," he said slowly, as though trying to convince both of them. "Aren't we?" The question hung in the air, heavy and unresolved. Emma felt a pang of guilt, the weight of her unspoken doubts pressing down on her. "I want us to be," she replied, choosing her words carefully. "But sometimes it feels like we're just going through the motions, like there's something missing." David's brow furrowed, a shadow crossing his features. "Missing, Emma, I love you. I've always tried to make you happy." "I know," she said quickly, reaching for his hand. His fingers were warm, grounding her momentarily, yet the connection felt tenuous. "It's not about what you've done or haven't done, it's about me." The tension between them was palpable, an invisible force that seemed to warp the air around them. Emma could see the flicker of hurt in David's eyes, a reflection of the turmoil she felt within. "I just need to understand what I'm feeling," she continued, her voice trembling slightly. "I need to figure out what's beneath the surface." David nodded, though his expression remained troubled. "I don't want to lose you," he said quietly, the vulnerability in his voice striking a chord deep within Emma. "You won't," she promised, though in her heart, she knew that assurance was as fragile as a wisp of cloud, easily scattered by the winds of change. As they stood in the garden, each lost in their own thoughts, the silence grew, not uncomfortable but rather reflective, like a quiet lull before a storm. Emma realized that this moment, with all its unspoken truths and lingering uncertainties, was a crossroads, a point from which their path together might diverge or converge anew. And as the sun dipped lower in the sky, casting a golden hue over the garden, Emma felt a flicker of hope alongside the unease. Perhaps, she mused, it was in acknowledging the cracks that they might find a way to rebuild, to nurture something new from the seeds of their shared dreams and individual desires. Chapter 3. Unraveling Threads. The evening air was thick with the scent of jasmine, a sweet fragrance that clung to Emma as she paced the length of the living room. Shadows danced across the walls, cast by the flickering candles she had lit in a bid to calm her restless mind. But serenity was elusive tonight, slipping through her fingers like sand. David sat on the edge of the sofa, his posture tense, hands clasped tightly together, as if in prayer. His eyes tracked Emma's movements, each step a silent beat in the growing symphony of their shared discontent. "Emma," David finally spoke, his voice breaking the uneasy silence. "We need to talk about what's going on. I can't keep pretending that everything's fine when it's not." Emma paused, her back to him, staring out the window where the city lights glittered like distant stars. "I know," she whispered, her breath fogging the glass. I'm trying to figure things out." Her words hung in the air, a fragile declaration that masked the chaos within. She turned to face him, her heart pounding with the weight of unspoken truths. Lately, I feel like I've been living someone else's life, she confessed, her voice trembling. And I don't know how to find my way back to myself. David's gaze softened, though a flicker of frustration marred his features. Is it about him? He asked, his tone sharp despite his attempt at calm. That guy at the winery. The question cut through the air, a direct hit to the heart of her turmoil. Emma flinched, the mention of the stranger stirring something unnamed and unsettling within her. It's not about him, she insisted, though the denial felt hollow. It's about us, about me. David stood, closing the space between them with deliberate steps. Emma, I love you, he pleaded, reaching for her hand. I thought we were building something real. She met his gaze, seeing the sincerity there, the vulnerability that mirrored her own. I love you too, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. But love isn't always enough, is it? The question hung heavily between them, a stark reminder of the chasm that had grown in the shadow of their once bright dreams. Emma pulled her hand away, needing to create space to breathe, to think. I just need time, she murmured, turning away once more, her eyes tracing the outline of the city skyline. Time to understand what I really want. David's silence was a tangible presence, a testament to the struggle within him. Take your time, he finally said, his voice resigned yet tinged with hope. But please, don't shut me out. She nodded, the weight of their conversation settling heavily on her shoulders. As David retreated to the bedroom, the soft click of the door closing behind him, Emma sank onto the sofa, burying her face in her hands. The room around her felt both familiar and foreign, a reflection of her internal dissonance. She had always envisioned her future with David, the steady, unwavering anchor amidst life's storms. Yet now the path ahead seemed shrouded in uncertainty, the threads of their relationship unraveling beneath the scrutiny of her newfound doubts. Emma's thoughts drifted back to the stranger at the winery, his image a ghostly echo in her mind. His presence had sparked something within her, an awakening of desires and dreams she had long buried beneath the expectations of others. As the candles flickered and the night deepened, Emma realized that this moment, raw, painful, and honest, was a necessary reckoning. It was in the unraveling that she might find the strength to weave a new tapestry of her life, one defined by authenticity and truth. And though the journey ahead was fraught with uncertainty, Emma felt a flicker of resolve, a quiet assurance that she would find her way, not by following the path laid out for her, but by forging one of her own. Chapter 4. In Vino Veritas. The vineyard sprawled before Emma like a painter's dream, the vines weaving intricate patterns beneath a cloudless sky. The sun cast a golden hue over the rows, and the air buzzed with the low thrum of conversation and clinking glasses. Emma wandered through the throng, her heart a metronome keeping time with her footsteps. She hadn't expected to return to this place so soon, yet here she was, drawn by an invisible thread that tugged at her very soul. As she sampled a delicate Pinot Noir, she felt it a familiar presence, a magnetic pull that made the tiny hairs on her arms stand on end. Emma turned, her breath catching at the sight of the stranger from the winery, now closer than ever. His eyes, a shade of blue that spoke of deep waters, met hers with an intensity that sent a shiver down her spine. Fancy seeing you here, he greeted, his voice warm with a hint of teasing. The corners of his mouth lifted in a smile that could melt the coldest of resolves. Emma felt her own lips curve in response, a reflex she couldn't suppress. I was about to say the same thing, she replied, trying to keep her tone light despite the flutter in her chest. They fell into step beside each other, their conversation an easy flow of words and laughter that felt strangely intimate. The stranger, now introduced as Lucas, had an air of genuine curiosity about him, a way of making Emma feel seen, not as David's partner, but as herself. You seem different from last time I saw you, Lucas observed, his gaze steady yet gentle. Emma hesitated, unsure how to articulate the storm within her. It's been a time of reflection, she admitted, her voice carrying the weight of unshed confessions. Lucas nodded, as if understanding the complexities beneath her words. Reflection can be a powerful thing. It can lead us to truths we didn't know we were seeking. His words struck a chord, reverberating through Emma's core. Here, with a man she barely knew, she felt a sense of clarity emerging from the chaos. Her desires, her fears, they were no longer abstract notions, but tangible elements of her reality. As they strolled past a row of vines, Lucas reached for a grape, offering it to her with a playful glint in his eye. "Try this," he urged, his hand brushing hers in a fleeting touch that sent sparks up her arm. Emma accepted the grape, its sweetness bursting on her tongue. "It's lovely," she murmured, though she was no longer talking about the fruit. Lucas studied her, a hint of something unspoken lingering between them. "Emma," he began, his tone shifting to something more earnest, "I don't know what you're going through, but I sense you're on the brink of something important. Don't be afraid to follow where it leads." His words were both a challenge and an invitation, igniting a fire in her that had long been dormant. Emma realized, with a jolt, that she was standing at a precipice, her heart teetering on the edge of an emotional epiphany. The truth was clear now. She had been living in the shadows of her own life, and it was time to step into the light. Their encounter ended with a lingering glance, a promise of possibilities yet to unfold. As Emma watched Lucas disappear into the crowd, she felt a newfound determination settle over her. Returning to David, to the life she knew, would mean confronting the fractures that had formed beneath their surface. Yet for the first time, Emma was unafraid of the path ahead. In vino veritas, she thought, recalling the age-old adage, in wine there is truth. And it was in this truth, unearthed in the heart of the vineyard, that Emma found the courage to embrace the unknown, to seek the life she had always yearned for, but never dared to claim. Chapter 5. The Confession. The evening settled over the city like a soft, comforting shawl, yet Emma felt none of its warmth. She sat at the small table by the window, her fingers worrying the edge of the napkin on her lap. It was a modest Italian bistro, the kind where the scent of garlic and oregano seemed to seep into every pore. It had been David's suggestion, a place they often frequented in happier times. Tonight, however, the air was thick with unspoken words and the weight of impending revelation. David arrived, his face a mask of practiced calm, though Emma noticed the slight tremor in his hands as he reached for the menu. They ordered without much conversation, each of them aware of the precarious balance of their dialogue. For Emma, the evening had been leading to this moment, a confrontation she both dreaded and craved, like a storm she needed to weather to find the calm on the other side. "Emma," David began, his voice barely above a whisper, "I've been thinking a lot about us, about everything that's been happening." She met his gaze, her heart pounding against her ribs. "So have I," she replied, her voice steadier than she felt. The silence stretched, taut and oppressive. Finally, Emma drew a deep breath, the words tumbling out of her before she could second-guess them. "Why does it feel like we're holding on to something that's already gone? I can't keep pretending everything's fine when it isn't." David's eyes softened, a flicker of pain crossing his features. "I know," he said, his voice laced with regret. "I think I've known for a while now." Emma felt a pang of sadness mixed with relief. "Then why haven't we talked about it? Why keep pretending?" David looked down at his hands, his expression one of a man standing on the precipice of a confession he could no longer avoid. "Because I was afraid of losing you, of facing the truth." His words resonated with a truth she had sensed, but hoped was not real. Emma steeled herself, her heart aching at the vulnerability in his eyes. "What truth, David?" He hesitated, his voice breaking slightly. "I wasn't faithful, Emma," he finally admitted, the words hanging in the air like a specter. "It happened a few months ago. I thought it was just a mistake, but I can't keep lying to you, to us." The confession landed with a heavy finality, each word a chisel striking at the fragile edifice of their relationship. Emma's breath caught, her mind reeling as the implications of his betrayal sunk in. "Why?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper, fighting the tears that threatened to spill. David's expression was one of anguish. "I don't know, it was a moment of weakness, of feeling disconnected. But it wasn't because of you, Emma, it was my own failing, my own cowardice." The betrayal stung, yet amidst the pain, there was a strange clarity. Emma realized she had been grasping at a mirage, an illusion of the life they once shared. The foundation of their relationship, she now saw, had been fragile for far longer than she cared to admit. "I should have told you what had happened," David continued, his voice hoarse with remorse. "But I was hoping we could find our way back to each other without you ever knowing. I was wrong." Emma nodded slowly, the hurt in her eyes mingling with a newfound resolve. "I appreciate your honesty, David, but maybe this is the clarity we both needed." David's shoulders slumped, defeat and relief washing over him in equal measure. "So what now?" he asked, his voice tinged with resignation. Emma looked at him, her heart heavy yet unburdened. "I think we need to find our own paths. Maybe we can rebuild ourselves, find out who we are without the pretense." Her words carried a weight of finality, yet also a hint of hope. It was a painful truth, but one that offered the promise of a new beginning. As they sat in the quiet bistro, the world outside continued to spin, indifferent to their personal upheaval. And while the end of their relationship loomed large, Emma felt the first stirrings of freedom, the beginning of a journey towards authenticity and self-discovery. The confession had shattered her world, but in the debris, she glimpsed the possibility of a future shaped by her own choices, untethered from the past. Chapter 6. New Beginnings. The cityscape stretched beneath Emma like a glittering tapestry as she ascended the steps to her sanctuary, the rooftop garden. Each step, a quiet declaration of independence, carried her further from the echoes of the past. She pushed open the heavy door, letting the cool night air wash over her. Stars twinkled above, scattered like diamond dust across the velvet sky, their distant light a reminder of the vast possibilities that lay before her. The garden was a serene oasis amidst the urban sprawl, its lush greenery and fragrant blooms offering solace. Emma moved slowly, her fingers brushing against the soft petals of flowers that whispered tales of rebirth and resilience. This place, once shared with David, now became a canvas for her solitude, a space where she could untangle the threads of her heart's desires. She settled onto a wrought iron bench, the city lights below flickering like fireflies in the night. Her mind drifted back to the confrontation with David, the raw honesty of his confession, and the bittersweet relief it brought. Though the wound was fresh, it was cleansing, a necessary incision to excise the falsehoods that had bound them. Emma inhaled deeply, the air scented with lavender and thyme, grounding her in the present. For the first time in months, she allowed herself to imagine a future unburdened by the weight of expectation. The allure of authenticity beckoned, a life where she could embrace her truths without fear or compromise. She thought of Lucas, the enigmatic stranger who had sparked something within her at the vineyard. His words had been a catalyst, igniting a fire within her that refused to be extinguished. Emma smiled softly, acknowledging the impact of their connection. It wasn't about him, she realized, but about what he represented, the courage to live fully and fiercely. The garden was alive with possibility, a living testament to the cycles of growth and renewal. Emma stood, her heart swelling with a sense of hope that felt almost foreign yet undeniably right. She ran her fingers through her hair, feeling the cool breeze weave through the strands like a gentle caress. As she gazed at the horizon, the first hints of dawn began to unfurl, painting the sky in hues of rose and gold. It was a new beginning, a tender promise of what lay ahead. Emma knew the path would not be easy, but it was her own, shaped by her choices and desires. She turned away from the view, her steps lighter, her resolve firm. The rooftop garden had offered her clarity and comfort, a reminder that endings were merely preambles to new chapters. Emma descended the stairs, leaving behind the echoes of past constraints and stepping into a world teeming with potential. And so with each step, she embraced the boundless future, driven by authenticity and self-love, weaving her own story, one where she was the author of her destiny,